From the beginning of September, at least in England, many students are returning to their schools, colleges, and universities. In the Middle Ages, only a minority of children went to school, and they were mainly boys. Children from medieval peasant families didn't need schooling. After all, what was the point of being literate if you were just going to till the fields all day or weave baskets? But for those who were lucky enough, they could, by the end of the Middle Ages, attend one of the hundreds of educational institutes available. Let's travel back in time to the Middle Ages and take a look at what they studied, who taught them, and what happened when tensions developed between the pupils and the people. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Take me to church. During the 7th and 8th centuries, there was a need to train boys and young men to join the ever-growing number of monasteries that were springing up around Europe. Even peasants could send their children to join the church. They were unlikely to reach the heights of bishops or abbots like those from a noble background, but as long as they agreed to remain there for the rest of their lives, young boys could become recruits and were offered up by their parents as child oblates. At least that way they were guaranteed a bed to sleep on and food in their bellies. As the age of 7 was usually regarded as the threshold of entering childhood from infancy, it was probably around that age that their training would begin. As far as noble families were concerned, younger sons who would not inherit, and almost always daughters who were not likely to be married, were sent to monasteries or convents to be educated. Any noble boy who was found to be wanting, that is perhaps disabled or weak, either physically or mentally, and unlikely to be able to become a knight, was also sent to the monks. Illegitimate children, both rich and poor, were usually sent into the church, especially the bastard children of priests, as, the lifestyle would purify them from the flaw of their birth. Learn the hard way. Before universities, cathedral schools were the highest type of educational institutions. On average, children began song school or reading school at the age of around 7 until they were about 10 or 12. Both the tunes and words of religious hymns were taught in song school, and the children were usually part of the cathedral choir. At reading school, pupils learned the alphabet and, unsurprisingly, how to read. Up until the 12th century, they were taught in Latin. Later, the monks would teach in the country's own language. English children were also taught French. Writing, prayers, and a little arithmetic might also be learned. The author Nicholas Orme writes about an average Anglo-Saxon school day in his 2006 book Medieval Schools from Roman Britain to Renaissance England. The information about a typical school day for trainee monks comes from the prolific writer and bishop Ælfric of Eynsham. He says that, quote, "Boys in monasteries rose at midnight and joined the monks in church to say matins, probably returning to bed afterwards. They woke up again about dawn and worked in school for a period. When the bell rang for the next service, prime, they visited the lavatory to wash, singing the 7 penitential psalms as they did so, and went to church. A second period of school ensued, followed by the services of terce, mass, and sext, leading to dinner in the refectory, where the boys sang grace before and afterwards. After this, they probably joined in saying the service of none. In the afternoon, there was a third period of school, followed by the service of vespers, then probably supper, and finally the evening service of compline, after which they went to bed for their first sleep." End quote. Sounds horrendous, especially when you consider that some of these boys were only 7 years old, but the church was considered as much a place of education as the classroom. The boys had to sit on benches during lessons. Writing was done on wax tablets because parchment was expensive. Notes could be taken by scratching letters into the wax with a wooden stylus. The writing could easily be scraped away so that the tablet could be reused. If the notes were important, they could later be transcribed onto parchment, although the use of paper was not widespread until the later Middle Ages. Having only a little amount of note-taking meant that most of the knowledge had to be remembered, and therefore most exams were done orally. Any child that was deemed negligent or lazy was punished with a beating, either by the use of a rod or a whip. A child might be stripped and held down if the transgression was thought to be wicked enough. In fact, corporal punishment was so widely accepted that the stick or whip were seen as symbols of a teacher's occupation. high hopes. Once a child had finished his school education, he could go on to have a career as a clerk if he had grasped the fundamentals of accountancy and letter writing, or possibly in the church as a scribe. For those who were wealthy enough, university was always an option. However, unlike today, medieval universities had a narrow range of subjects available for study. You had the choice of just three: theology, law, or medicine. European university lessons were still inseparable from Christianity and its teachings. As we all know, in the Middle Ages, everything revolved around the church. Some students were as young as 14 when they entered into university studies. By the middle of the 15th century, there were around 80 universities across Europe, like Paris, which specialized in law, or Salerno in medicine. After King Henry II of England banned English students from attending the University of Paris, Oxford University, which has existed in some form since 1096, rapidly expanded. Many students chose which university to attend because of the reputation of its teachers. In canon and civil law, Bologna, the oldest known university, was considered to be unequalled. The schoolmaster, John Leland, who was teaching in Oxford around 1401, was highly regarded. His writings on Latin and English grammar were extremely popular and widely copied. Robert of Sorbonne was a French theologian and founder of the famous Sorbonne College in Paris. Robert had his own specific ideas about how students should behave whilst they lived and studied at his college, and he laid down some ground rules such as, quote, "No one therefore shall eat meat in the house on Advent, nor on Monday or Tuesday of Lent, nor from Ascension Day to Pentecost." What do you know, medieval meat-free Mondays. He also said that students should, quote, "conduct themselves quietly and abstain from too much noise, lest those passing through the court and street be scandalized. If a fellow shall come late to lunch from classes, he shall have his full portion, but if from his own affairs, he shall have bread only." It would seem that the reputation of the college was at the forefront of his mind when he insisted that, quote, "no women of any sort shall eat in the private rooms." And they clearly took it rather seriously, because anyone who violated that rule would have to pay the penalty, which was 6 pence. As far as the latest fashions went, Master Robert preferred that his students should, quote, "also wear closed outer garments, nor shall they have trimmings, or grease, or red or green silk on the outer garment or hood. Also, no one shall have loud shoes or clothing by which scandal might be generated in any way." By having all the students dress in the same way, like the school uniforms worn today, they were instantly recognizable. At university, this meant wearing a gown. At the Spanish College of Bologna, which was founded in the 14th century, wearing fashionable clothing resulted in a fine, as one of the rules stated that, quote, "clothes shall be decent, and they shall not wear unsuitable robes and garments, or shoes with pointed toes." According to Berth M. Marty, who wrote a book about the Spanish College at Bologna in the 14th century, the college was an endowed residence which was lucky enough to have wealthy patrons on hand to provide each of the students with, quote, "one new academic gown adequately furred with sheepskins such as the students at Bologna are normally accustomed to wear, and another unfurred gown of cloth of the statutory colour, and a hood of the same colour or suitable cloth." Which is similar to the Sorbonne in Paris, where there were no fancy trimmed hoods allowed either. Just as today, in the Middle Ages, students found attending university an expensive business. Charles H. Haskins produced a paper in which he translated several letters from medieval students. This one was sent home from Oxford and was written, Haskin notes, in very bad Latin. "Be to his venerable master, A. Greetings. This is to inform you that I am studying at Oxford with the greatest diligence, but the matter of money stands greatly in the way of my promotion, as it is now 2 months since I spent the last of what you sent me. The city is expensive and makes many demands. I have to rent lodgings, buy necessaries, and provide for many other things which I cannot now specify. Wherefore I respectfully beg your paternity that by the promptings of divine pity you may assist me, so that I may be able to complete what I have well begun. For you must know that without Ceres and Bacchus, Apollo grows cold." We can only guess what the things the student needed, but couldn't specify were. But with the mentions of Ceres, the Roman goddess of fertility, and Bacchus, the Roman god of wine and merrymaking, it doesn't take a genius to work it out. How little things change. Townies and Gownies. It was that sort of scandalous tavern drinking behaviour that got some of the students involved in some serious altercations. Most medieval universities did not have a campus on site, and students found accommodation in the university town among the general population. For the most part, university revenues came from the Catholic Church, and that made them independent of municipal money and authority. So scholars found themselves exempt from civil law, the university having special jurisdiction. This caused a lot of tension between citizens of the host town and the students. But they also spent their money in the towns and helped to boost the economy, something which they held over their hosts. Students often made threats to move to other towns if they could not negotiate good terms for rents for accommodation or lecture halls. Having autonomy meant that the university could just up sticks and move somewhere else. In the 14th century, the University of Lisbon moved to Coimbra for a time. And in 1229, after a riot started by students, the University of Paris left the city and did not return for 2 years. Because of the ill feelings between townsfolk and students, conflict was inevitable, and hostilities broke out between town and gown on a regular basis. One of the most notorious confrontations was the Battle of St. Scholastica at the University of Oxford in February of 1355. An argument erupted in the Swindlestock Tavern in the centre of the town when 2 students complained about the sourness of the wine and then threw the said wine in the face of the taverner. It turned into a 3-day clash when, according to author Hal Cheetham in his 1971 book Portrait of Oxford, quote, "Hundreds on both sides now sprang to arms. Gown fought town through the streets, and the townsmen marched about and broke into one hall after another, smashing and plundering, dragging out terrified students, beating and killing them." Even a proclamation to cease from King Edward III could not stop the violence, which only abated on the evening of the 3rd day when, quote, "Town and gown took stock. 63 scholars and an unspecified number of townsmen had been killed. There was no count of the wounded. 19 student halls had been spoiled and their contents stolen or ruined. Set on fire, shops and houses in various parts of the city were soon smouldering ruins. Each blames the other for what had taken place." Over the following days, it was concluded by the king's judges that the town was to blame, and the mayor and his bailiffs were imprisoned at the notorious Marshalsea jail in London. The town was ordered to pay an immediate fine of 500 marks and an annual penalty of 100 marks. Then, on the anniversary of the massacre each year for nearly 5 centuries, the town was forced to celebrate a solemn mass. Conflicts between the townspeople and the university continued through the centuries, but nothing ever came close to the violence of the events of February 1355. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments down below what you think it would have been like being a student in the medieval times. And based on what we've learned here today, what similarities have you noticed to what still goes on? Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!